Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's a little after 2 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Don Durden. We have a lot of new people here, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Don Durden. This is my co-chair over here, Bob Manning, and this is the Kendall County Bernie Fair Oaks Ranch Transportation Committee, and it's intentionally long because it includes a lot of people. We appreciate all of y'all being here today. I appreciate the in this season of Thanksgiving. I hope that we're all mindful that we live in a country where we can participate in a democracy that where we govern ourselves, and that means participating in that governance and the decisions that our governments make. So with that sort of brief introduction, I want to just mention that I think a lot of y'all are here in response to some things on social media, and I just want to address that briefly with as much respect and sincerity and honesty and humility as I can. First off, I am a Kendall County resident. I live in Precinct 4. Our property fronts on 473, actually 473 bisects our property. And so we're familiar with the impact of transportation facilities and increasing traffic flows on our lifestyle and on our property. And we understand the potential for further encroachment of those facilities onto our property, and we would prefer that not happen. And I understand the fear that comes when you believe that you're on the bullseye. But what I want you to do is to examine my record and the record of these people, not just in the last hour or last year, but over the course of their participation in civic affairs. And find out if you believe they're honest and sincere people. And I think you'll find that they are. And so I'm asking you to not be fearful and respond to rumors that are unfounded, that are not true, but have courage. We have some serious issues that we have to face in this community. We have a huge population coming our way. Probably will double over the next 20 years. And in all likelihood, the traffic will double over the next 20 years. Now, the Kendall Gateway died in 2018, but that doesn't mean the problem is resolved. I helped initiate this committee from Commissioner's Court, and I did that because I wanted to help solve the problem. And so again, I'm asking you respectfully, with great humility, that you have the courage to focus on the problem. Focus your energies on the problem. What can you live with? What can you not live with? And if we do that and not focus our energy on fighting things, booger bears under the bed that don't exist, then I believe we will come to consensus. So I appreciate you being here again today. If you have concerns, please feel free to express them, but please believe us when we say the Kendall Gateway is not coming back. It's not being considered by this committee. It is not being considered by anyone else that I know of. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that there's not somebody out there someplace who would like to have it come back. And they're entitled to feel that way as an individual citizen. But as far as this committee is concerned, we're not considering it. Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Don. Very well put. What I want to add to it is many of you have been to some of our meetings. Some of you have paid attention on the feeds of our meetings through our website, whatever. I just want to remind everybody that if you are new to one of these committee meetings, we're entirely made up of citizens who live here. There is no consultant up here driving any process. There's no hidden agenda where we're being told behind closed doors before we come out here what it is we're supposed to do and what it is we're supposed to recommend and conclude. This is a conversation amongst ourselves that live here, and that includes you guys. We go out of our way to be transparent with the public about what we're doing. We always have. Our agenda includes not one but two chances for public comment, and we welcome comments during the meetings. We have a history of that, and if you've been coming to our meetings, you know it's to be true. So on behalf of all the hardworking committee members, and then a little bit of defense of them, there is no conspiracy. There is no marching orders that we're getting from the mayor, from the county judge, from anybody. And TxDOT's not the puppeteer behind the scenes. It just doesn't exist. We on purpose didn't ask them into this process. We think we have enough history that we need to do it ourselves. But we have to take seriously the fact we built one road in this community in the last 30 years. I moved here, there was 5,000 people here. There's 20 now, we're going to 40. These things are not going to solve themselves. We've got to be intelligent and smart and cooperative. No one up here is in a hurry to build a road through your family estate or through your living room or to put 300-foot right-of-ways anywhere unless we absolutely have to. So listen to the dialogue, respect what these people are up here doing. They're just you. They've just raised their hand and offered to spend 2 years of their life up here going through this stuff, and not many of us were experts in it. There's a couple or three of us, but not me. I'm just here to help it be open and transparent. That's what I stood for in my time on City Council, and I'm hoping to be helpful in that regard now. Having said that, today I think we brought some of you here under false pretenses inadvertently, and I want to blame Fair Oaks Ranch for this completely. It's all their fault.
Thanks, sir.
We had intended, and it made it in the newspaper. Thank you, Zach. You took good notes and published the right thing that you heard, but it's not going to happen. We were going to start bringing up some of the controversial projects in the southeast quadrant, whether or not we needed another north-south escape route out of Bernie to San Antonio. And that was going to happen today, but in conjunction with a formal presentation from the city of Fair Oaks Ranch to us. Their desires, their perspective, their needs are paramount in that discussion. And they sent word several days ago that while they had intended to be here today to make that presentation, they in fact are not ready. So they've put it off 2 more weeks, well, to our next meeting. I don't know if it's 2 weeks or 3, whenever our next meeting is. So we're going to, the agenda that you've got in your hands, it doesn't show that anymore, and it shows different things that we're going to talk about. And I think they'll be equally interesting. I'm glad you're here. Apologize for you probably not having us deal with what we thought we were going to, but that's just how it worked. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Any other committee members have any opening remarks that you'd like to make? Bobby?
Yes, sir. Bobby Bailly, one of the representatives was City of Fair Oaks Ranch. And yes, we wanted to be ready. We felt it was necessary, and the city management and the mayor felt it was necessary to put forth the capital improvement program that was done recently at the last city council meeting. They've accepted the CIP, the capital improvement program, and wanted to make sure it aligns with some of the proposals or some of the opinions and the recommendations the city will provide when our representation is given next meeting.
Thank you, Bobby. Anybody else? Was that a hand up, John?
That was a hand up. Thank you. Just first thing, a reminder to those of us, this is our second meeting we've had in this room, and I believe for the recording, hit that little button on your mic to turn it on so that the audio recording will work. Is that right? That's what I remember hearing last time. Otherwise, it won't pick you up. Secondly, due to the agenda change, I just wanted to say to the audience that if there are people who came here because of those specific items on the agenda, I don't think any of us will be insulted or hurt if people decide, hey, I want to use this time differently and come back next time. You're free if you don't want to be here right now. It's not going to hurt my feelings if somebody says, I want to come back next time. That said, I think you've come all this way. We're going to have our public comment period, and we welcome all the comments that people make. You're welcome to make those comments now, and we'll make note of those and apply them next week or next time we discuss those issues.
Absolutely. Good, Tim. Anybody else here?
Jonah, what button are you talking about?
I think they're all on right now.
Do you see a green light at the bottom of your microphone?
We have different microphones.
Oh,
You're in the staff section. You don't,
apparently I'm in a different, I'm in the special section here.
You can control your mic.
All right, while the rest of the committee fumbles around with the technology here, I'd like to move to consideration of the minutes of October 19th. Those were distributed at the last meeting.
Move to approve the minutes of October 19th.
A motion for approval from Bobby.
Second.
Second by Bryce. Is there any further discussion about the minutes? Is there anybody objects to approving the minutes as presented? Hearing none, minutes are approved as presented. We come to our first opportunity for public comment. As Mr. Manning said, we have two opportunities, one at the beginning of the meeting, one at the end of the meeting. We'd ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll do the best to time you and give you a little advance warning so we don't just like yank you off the stage. And if you run a little over, we'll probably cut you some slack. You will need to come up to the microphone and speak into the microphone so the people that have watched the videos after this, and I don't know if they're watching now, can hear what you're saying. If you would, please identify yourself when you come to the microphone and where you live, and then take off. So self-organize.
Might need to adjust the microphone. It's aimed towards us. We promoted you to sound man now.
I guess it's good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I can.
I guess those of you on the committee, if I told you I was going to remain silent today, you probably wouldn't have believed me. But I read something a couple of days ago from People for Bikes. It's a Boulder, Colorado bike advocacy group. And the title of it, Austin will be America's next great bicycling city. And I thought, wow, Austin is finally going to solve their infrastructure problem because the last 50 or 60 years in my memory, they ain't had one. But they did have a couple of initiatives they presented to the voters, and one was a transportation. And they really used the word network. And I think that's the key word. I've been advocating a bicycle trail. Well, I'm expanding my horizons now because I think that's the answer. And Bobby Bailly is certainly familiar with what they've done in the Rio Grande Valley when he lived there. They're connecting a lot of these cities. And in the case of the Valley, it's going to be an economic boon there because that's the birding capital of the nation. And Robin Stallings, who is one of my friends, executive director of Bicycle Texas out of Austin, predicts that will be the future bicycle destination area. We have the potential of being the same thing here. With a quaint German town, we've got brew pubs, we've got Bernie Lake, we're the gateway to the hill country. And I think, we need to be thinking in terms of a bicycle network rather than what I envisioned as a trail that connected Fair Oaks Ranch and Bernie. I think there's a real economic development or benefit to doing that because you can just select almost any trail in the U.S. that has been put along the old rail beds, and it's been an economic boon. As I said, I thought Austin, I was happy that Austin looks like they're moving in the right direction. Then I look at San Antonio, and in the Austin-San Antonio rivalry, obviously I always like to fall down on the side of San Antonio, but we've got 3 council people there that said, well, gee whiz, it looks like I may want to do some pork barrel drainage projects in my district, and they're crawfishing right here in midstream now, when they've made so much progress, and they need to finish some of these connector trails to to do what that system was, that former Mayor Howard Peak envisioned 20 years ago, that would connect the city where they would really be mobile. Anyway, that's my take. I think the key word is network, where we can really be mobile by bicycle and, still have automobiles around too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Yes, ma'am.
My OCD isn't liking it.
Well, my tech skills are much less than yours. Thank you. Thanks. Hi, good afternoon.
Way to go, Jonah.
Your tech skills may be good, but your engineering's a little short.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Thank you. First of all, my name is Alex Rudd. I live at 68 La Concepcion Drive in Bernie, way past K without a name. I first want to thank the committee very, very much. This is my first attendance at a meeting, and I know you are a group of citizen volunteers. I have great respect and appreciation for all your efforts. I really do. And your hardworking citizens, I've been sharing, as I came on board, catching up to what's been going on, I've been sharing that you are citizen volunteers. You are working hard for us. And certainly if there's been any misunderstanding as to the intent of this committee, I certainly hope that we will clear that up and quickly. It's a very hard task, has very serious implications, and also it's very complicated. There's no doubt about that. I do have a specific concern with one thing that I'll talk about right now, and that is any potential that you folks are under a deadline of any kind. And this is not based on a rumor or something I heard from another citizen or something I found out on social media. This is based on statements that I observed during earlier meetings this year by the mayor, and certainly not to accuse him of anything, but these statements were rather specific. This was after the pandemic, after you guys were forced out of commission, that he wanted something within 6 months. And this was earlier this year around May. There was another comment made to the effect that by the end of the year, and I'm paraphrasing, please don't take what I say as word for word. And also a remark that we may have to just simply dust off old studies and see what looks good. I'm very concerned that may have actually promoted some misunderstandings as to, we all know the dirty word, the gateway, and that makes people scared. Specifically, considering the scope of this project, the huge impact not only to the city but to the county, obviously it's going to have a massive impact whatever we decide to do, as well as projects that we don't want to see. I think, in my opinion, it's inappropriate for you guys to be under any deadline at this time, especially so close. I believe you deserve more time if needed. You're obviously working very hard. You had a setback due to the pandemic. And if you need more time, I would hope that it would be granted. I certainly hope that it would not be taken from your hands and given over to a vote by other entities within our government. This would also, if this were taken from you and you were imposed a deadline without an extension, this would contradict previous actions by the city. The Uniform Development Code, my understanding is that that came forth, an extension was granted for zoning, and due to the need for public input, another extension was granted. Certainly.
3 minutes, Ms. Rudd.
Go ahead.
3 minutes.
Okay. Oh, they're up?
Yeah, they are, but go ahead.
Okay, one more minute. That was a city issue. This is a county issue. There's a lot more people involved. It's a much bigger potential impact. Considering all this, and we all know the challenges we've been facing, I sincerely hope that if you guys need more time, it will be granted and that the public be alerted to that. And I think that would help relieve a lot of anxiety in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rudd.
Respond to it, Neil.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Because we're not a government agency, we get to respond to citizen comments when they're made, and I can respond to that. Don and I just a few weeks ago, made presentations about where we stand in terms of our progress. We made it to the city, to the county, and to Fair Oaks. And in all cases, the point was made very profoundly by Don and not argued by any of the elected bodies that we are not working under a tight schedule. We will not. This is too important, and we got to get it right. In Don's words, in cases like this, the fastest way to go is to go slow. So we do not feel any undue pressure, whatever. A small sense of urgency is always helpful to keep you from admiring the problem ad nauseum. We've got to get on with it eventually. But we now know we are at the crunch time part of our work, and we're not going to be rushed. So thanks for your comments, and yeah, if you can help alleviate those concerns. I don't feel the pressure. I don't think anybody on this committee feels any arbitrary pressure on schedule.
It's certainly not arbitrary. There may come a time when there are some funding opportunities that may impose some pressure on us that we need to come up with recommendations to inform decisions that either the cities and the county may make regarding bond issues or federal funding or things like that. But at this time, there's nothing imminent. So we're trying to get this done right and moving as fast as we can, but to be thorough and deliberate. Other comments from the public? Mr. Kyle.
He's the one that thinks we have 500 foot right of.
Good afternoon, committee. Lance Kyle, 226 Cascade Caverns Road. I'm in the Bernie ETJ. Let me just warn everybody ahead of time, I'm going to have to use the G word at least once. Sorry about that, Jonah. Okay. I sent the committee a copy of my remarks earlier. They're about 350 words. So I'll try to get through it pretty quickly. I'm glad to see we're seeing some good data today. The handout looks really rich in data. The title of my comments is Transportation Planning Must Be Data-Driven. Today, the committee is going to be discussing new traffic data which were presumably collected by TxDOT and supplied by the city. We need to make sure that these data are accurate and timely. For example, the Kendall Gateway study in 2018 contained flawed and stale data. TxDOT's Bluetooth-based tracking technology made questionable conclusions about pass-through trip destinations and traffic volumes through Bernie. Right-of-way sizes were also misrepresented. The implied easements or setbacks or right-of-ways were 300 feet, but express were 500. And environmentally sensitive features were severely discounted. Amazingly, no geologic or recharge features were even listed in the southeast quadrant. Also, data collected for Main Street traffic was stale because it preceded the opening of the Herf Bypass Road in 2017. I think the Herf Bypass Road had like a soft opening in like late 2016. Incidentally, about 40 local organizations were purportedly invited to 2 stakeholder working group meetings in late 2016 and early 2017, but only a handful showed up because many weren't actually notified. Cascade Caverns wasn't notified. Cal Creek wasn't notified, Geneva School wasn't notified, et cetera, et cetera. Consequently, community input was limited. Going forward, we need to know how many of the current traffic issues, quote unquote, are construction and IH-10 related versus school-driven and other. We also need to know why the Herf Bypass Road is, in my opinion, being underutilized. If it's being underutilized, it needs to be optimized. We also need to watch out for any future hockey stick projections from TxDOT. That agency has a reputation, and I'm sorry for people that have worked for TxDOT or are connected to TxDOT, but the truth hurts. We also need to watch out for any future hockey stick projections from TxDOT. That agency has a reputation for over-projecting future traffic counts, which are typically based on post-build-out scenarios. The recent claim that, quote, and correct me, Jeff, if I got this wrong, the recent claim that, quote, 10,000 vehicles will be coming through Bernie daily by 2040, close quote, needs to be tracked down to its source and analyzed.
Mr. Kyle, you're at 3 minutes, so if you can wrap it up.
Just 30 more seconds?
Okay.
How long a traffic zone is physically studied also needs to be revealed. I'll never forget the traffic counter that was installed on Main Street back in 2018 for a few hours and then removed. Finally, transportation planning isn't just about traffic data. The city and TxDOT also need to collect real environmental data. One proposed leg of the Bernie Loop / Kendall Gateway, Gateway twice, in the southeast quadrant passes through 1, Cibolo Creek, 2, Edwards Aquifer Contributing Zone, 3, the Lower Glen Rose Formation, 4, the Trinity Aquifer Zone, and 5, 3 major cave systems. Road planning lines never should have been blindly drawn through this recharge zone. Apparently, planners never visited this site or just didn't care. That's got to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. Others? Yes, sir.
Testing. My name's Kevin Marnell. I live in North Star Court in Bernie, out there in River Ranch, River Mountain. And I noticed a lot of empty seats in here. And I think part of that is the fact that this is being held on a work day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd recommend for input, I'm expecting information from you guys, and I'm not hearing as much as I'd like to hear. Maybe that information is in other sources. But next time you have a meeting, Don, or Bob, whenever that meeting takes place, it can be at an hour that the guys that are working right now can access this thing and give input here and respond. But I think if you want the kind of environment I think you're trying to create, which is a mutual give-take to solve the problem, that having more participation would add to that, get you to the goal you need to get to. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Warnell. Ms. Deaver, how are you today?
I'm up and walking, so we're good. Denise Deaver, I live at 53 Silent Spring in Bernie, not in the ETJ yet. Thank you. What I want to talk about is something I sent to a few of the committee members. Maybe some of you shared it with the rest of the committee members. I sat in on the TxDOT transportation freight mobility planning. I spoke to the county commissioners about this briefly. Spent 6 hours listening to basically the same presentation 3 times. I actually spoke to the rural portion of the transportation committee. Needs to know and needs to understand that this freight planning is in place. It was part of the gateway. It was rolled into the gateway in 2018. A lot of the numbers that we're dealing with was part of the freight planning that closed its books and was presented in 2018. And what I found out from just participating and telling them that I didn't think it was a good idea to have State Highway 46 designated as a freight planning optimized from I-10, go west to Pipe Creek, connect up to State Highway 16 from Bandera all the way down to Bexar County. Also throw in Kerrville, State Highway 173 all the way down to Bexar County as a freight mobility option. And then I didn't get to talk to them, but I should have. Throw in State Highway 27 in Comfort. How they were going to get from 16 all the way to I-10 in Comfort, I didn't get to see because we didn't zoom in on it. But you need to understand that this is going on. Right now, you need to go look at the freight mobility planning, and you need to understand that if we don't want this whole area to turn into that optimization for the future, then we need to be speaking up out these planning things. And I don't believe we had anybody that was representing us. If they were, I didn't hear them, so I apologize. In the future, if anybody wants to see what I gathered from this meeting, I'll be glad to email it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deaver. Appreciate you being there on behalf of Kendall County. Other comments? Okay, well, if something pops up in your mind in the meantime, we have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. I'd like to turn now to traffic counting. On page, let's see, you should have had a packet behind your agenda. It's about 10 pages. The first page, page 1, says technical foundation. What this is a draft of the committee report that I've been working on following the outline that was distributed. And so I'd like to just kind of step through this, and so we're all together as we go through this. I apologize that this is detailed in nature, but what I'm gathering is that we need to have, as Mr. Kyle said, some data-driven positions on this. So one of those primary data points is population. Starting in 2021, the census showed we had a 2020 population of 44,279 people. That's a density of about 66 or 67 people per square mile over the whole county. The Texas Demographic Center shows on their website that our population is 46,278. And that same website projects that our population will grow to 97,357 by 2040, and to 137,844 by 2050. That's a lot of people, a lot more people than we have now. To make matters even worse, the densities are not now and are likely not to be going forward uniform throughout the county. If you take an area, I apologize I don't have a graphic, but if you just imagine the Guadalupe River start at the eastern county line where it cuts across the county line, and you go upstream on the Guadalupe River until it gets to the confluence of the Big Joshua Creek and the Guadalupe River, and then you go west from there. The area south of that line represents about 38% of the county. That area contains 85% of the population. And so the population densities in that area, in this lower area, range from a low of 53 people per square mile, kind of in the western part of Kendall County, to a population of 2,128 people per square mile within the Burney city limits. So assuming that we that the TDC population projections come to pass, if they all end up living in this area south of that line, the average population density will be about 350 people per square mile. So if you imagine in this area we have 38% of 44,000 people, so that's maybe, 20,000 people living in that area. That could balloon to 88,000, more than 4 times as many. So it's more than just a doubling. So that's kind of the problem that we're faced with. And you look at the traffic. I don't know, the legislature says we can't build a wall on the county line. We can build one on the southern border, but not on the county line, and keep them out. So we got to figure out where we're going to put them, and how they're going to get around. But let's talk about how that population translates into traffic. We have grappled with traffic counts since the beginning. Some members of this committee thought we should go out and get traffic counts right away, and that we would use that to drive our process. Other members said, no, we can, we're lay people. We can look at a situation and decide whether it's congested or not. We're dealing with congestion. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that 46 and Herf Road or Esser is congested. Yeah. So anyway, we did make a decision. We kind of let that slide. And then about the time we got ready to start going to get some traffic counts in early 2020, COVID hit, and I think you may have noticed that there was a significant reduction in the amount of traffic during 2020. And traffic counts throughout the state reflect that. Depending on the class of roadway that you're on, traffic counts actually diminished anywhere from 15 to 40%, I believe, something like that. So we didn't pursue traffic counting then, and we haven't pursued it since then. We do have traffic data that we can analyze, though, and infer some information from that. And so I'll ask that you now turn to these sheets that are tabular, a bunch of numbers. Your engineers out there would just love this. I love spreadsheets and graphs. The rest of you can hold your breath and, if you'd like, try to walk through it. I'm sorry about that. IT guys, is there anybody here that's...
Two right here that I can hand out. But...
Is there any way to get those?
Have you emailed this to us? If you have, you can probably pull it up.
I haven't emailed it, no. I've tried to summarize this, and so this will go onto the website, but I think the summary, if you'll just listen to the summaries and the conclusions and listen to the discussion, I think you'll get the thrust of this. We have transportation or traffic count data from something called STARS. It's a statewide traffic analysis and reporting system. It's run by TxDOT. And what they do is, you probably have seen these things. They're a bunch of little tubes that are laid across the road every so often, and they're out there for a few days, and they count the traffic throughout the county. They do that all over the state, and they have done that for many years. I don't know, John, how long have they been counting traffic? Since you started?
Before then.
Before then. So this is a technology, not a new technology. This is an old technology, and they have a very stable, consistent record of counting these in the same locations throughout the state. And so they published this, and in this information, I've listed the website. You can go to it yourself, and you can pull it up, and you can confirm the numbers. You'll see that what it did was pull the data down from 2013, from 2019, and from 2020. And so if you look at those lists, those are the numbers in red there, the first three numbers in red, 3 columns. And I did that for the TxDOT roadways in Kendall County. Those roadways are I-10.
Our copies are black and white, and so the colors might not have shown up, so I'm not sure when you said the first one's in red, you might need to...
Okay.
What page?
Thank you. We're on page 5. And what we're talking about is the 3 columns labeled TxDOT 2013, TxDOT 2019, and TxDOT 2020. Are we there? Okay. The roadways that we looked at are I-10 main lanes, US 87, Main Street, which is actually Business 87. We looked at SH 46 in 2 sections, one east of west of the city of Bernie, and one on the east side of the city of Bernie. We looked at RM, that's Ranch to Market, 473, west of Sisterdale and east of Sisterdale. Farm to Market, 1621, which goes from Comfort to Waring. FM 1376, which goes from Bernie on up to 290, goes through Sisterdale. We have FM 474, which goes, and that's on page 7, goes from Bernie up to 473, just west of Kendalia. We have FM 3351, which actually goes all the way from I-10 It goes up to Bergheim, and shortly north of Bergheim, it transitions somewhere there to FM 3160, and that goes on up to Kendalia. And we have a few data points on Herf Road. So we looked at that, and what we found, we wanted to see whether the 2019 traffic counts, how did they compare with the 2020 traffic counts? And so we, over in the middle, the second to the last column on the right, says 2020 as a percent of 2019. You can see on I-10 that almost every one of the stations on I-10, the 2019 traffic, or the 2020 traffic was 85% of the 2019 traffic. In other words, there's a 15% drop in traffic in 2020. Everybody following me? Okay. On US 87, the numbers were quite a bit different. There was an average there of more than a 25% drop in average traffic on US 87 between Comfort and Fredericksburg.
John, those numbers at the bottom, is that the average?
Those are the averages, yes, sir. On Main Street, Business 87, the average was 88%. So traffic didn't drop quite as much within the city of Boerne. 2020 traffic was 87.8% of the 2019 traffic. We go on down through that, we look at some others, just maybe not go through all of them, but you can see what they are on the other pages. It was interesting to see that out in Rankin to Spain's area of the county, we were still at 84% or something like that. 2020 traffic was, 80-something% of the 2019 traffic. No case was it more than the 2019 traffic, except for FM 1376, which was a little bit more. So I think, we can conclude that we probably don't want to base any calculations, projections, designs, planning using 2020 data without further adjustment. Is that a safe assumption? Anybody disagree with that? Okay. So if we're not going to use the most recent available data, what would we use? Well, let's step back and let's compare the 2019 data to the 2013 data and see what the growth rates were over that 6-year period for those same locations. So we'll just kind of step through that same. This is the last column on the right. For I-10, the average growth on I-10 in Kendall County over that 6-year period was 24.3%. If you spread that out over the 6 years and assume it's like compound interest, that's a growth rate of 3.7% per year in traffic on I-10. On US 87, the growth rate of traffic was 42.6% in the 6-year period and 6.2% per year over the 6-year period. So that's a pretty rapid growth on US 87. On Main Street, the growth over the 6-year period was 20%, and that results in an average annual growth rate of 3.1% per year. SH 46, and this is west of the county line, west of I-10. I think it's something like 9.7%. I don't think I did a average annual there. east of the county line, or east of Main Street on 46. That includes River Road going out to the east towards Bergheim. The traffic grew there 33.1%. That's a growth rate of 4.9% per year. 473 east of Sisterdale, that traffic increased 88.7%, or 11.2% per year. Traffic on 3351 increased 38.3%, or 5.6% per year. You can see the other numbers there. Now, so I felt like, those growth rates are more or less consistent with the population growth that we have. And to the extent that they correlate with each other, it's from a stable base, I'd ask you whether you would consider using that as a starting point, the 2019 traffic counts.
When does the 2021 come out?
I don't know yet. We have some 2021 data from the city.
I know. That's what I'm looking at. It's way different.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll get into that in just a
go
minute.
Up. Okay.
Yeah.
I won't fast forward then.
Any other questions about that data or observations? And again, I just cringe at presenting all this stuff. I see people's eyes glazing over.
I have a comment.
Yes.
First of all, I really appreciate you compiling this. This is really helpful. I remember one of the elements in the Gateway study that caught a lot of people off guard was some of those traffic projections about traffic going northbound from 46 east. And it was interesting to me that in your diagram here, or in your table for the north of US 87 on I-10 main lanes, they actually, based on our counts from 2013 to 2019, went down 10%.
Which road are you on?
It's the only one that's negative growth.
Which road are you on?
I-10 main lanes, the bottom one there, north of US 87.
Mm-hmm. I think that possibly could be due to the fact that there was some construction going on at the intersection of I-10 and 87.
Is that where these traffic counters were on that end?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, there are anomalies like that, and it could have been the counter went bad.
It was weird that it was the only negative value pretty much for all of these, and I was trying to reconcile that with what I saw when I read through the Gateway study. So anyway, that was just something that stood out to me.
Well,
So is that 87 in Comfort?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, so then north of US 87, parentheses, south is here in Bernie?
No, the Bernie 87, Jonah's talking about I-10 main lanes north of 87, okay? And they were adding some ramps there and doing some main lane construction. Okay, the 87, which is called Main Street on this sheet.
Okay.
Okay, that's starts up here at Market Street, and it goes down to south of Christus Parkway.
Okay.
But I think, Jonah, we don't really know why that is, and I think that's why I feel comfortable. We have a bunch of data points, and maybe we throw that one out, but it does affect the general trend, but not significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I just noticed that the 2020 and the 2019 counts were lower than the 2013. Who knows if there was some event in 2013 that caused there to be more than usual traffic or whatever. It just stood out, given that specific thing has been an item of conversation before.
Okay.
Don, I thought I saw a hand up in the audience.
I'm sorry, my comments are after the meeting, I apologize.
Shoot, fire away.
Okay, a quick question, and forgive me if I overlooked the comment.
these numbers, do we have any data on how many are trucks? I keep hearing about getting heavy trucks off Main Street. Do we have data on how many are heavy trucks, and what is the destination of these trucks? Are they local destinations?
Use the mic.
Or are they truly using Main Street as a thoroughfare? The other question that came to mind is, these vehicles, do we know their destination? Are these parents going to and from school, going to HEB? Is it, what direction are these vehicles going? Do we have that data as well? I think that would be helpful.
These three data sources, I believe they have percent trucks, but it doesn't say which direction they're going. It doesn't have origin and destination information. There are some additional sources that we might want to consider that presents that information. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Thank you. There's some additional traffic data that can be pulled off of the TxDOT's website. It's not their STARS data. It's data that comes from TxDOT's statewide planning map. And that is listed in the spreadsheet under TxDOT 2040. This is TxDOT's, ostensibly their projections for 2040. And so if you compare the 2040 data projections to the 2019 data, that comparison is shown over there in the third column from the right. You'll see that with a couple of exceptions on I-10, each one of those stations just coincidentally shows up as the 2014 projections are 200% of the 2019 data.
You know, I don't think that's, I mean, if you divide, it's 103,000 divided by 60, that's about 70% increase from 19. It's double from 20, but 70% from 19. It's still a huge increase, but if we're going to have a number, it should, you know, should
You're
be
right.
accurate.
It is the double. It is the 2020 data that's 200. So there's a mistake in the header there.
It does seem like the projections are remarkably consistent in their percentages.
Right. I mean, that was my point. And
Yeah.
if you look at US 87 and all of the other roads, you'll see that they're 140%. Now, as somebody who looks critically at data, that would cause me to say we're not going to use the TxDOT 2020 projections.
The 2040 projections.
2040 projections.
Yeah.
Without some corroborating information.
Don, I think that was a very insightful little exercise that you did there. I think it's really helpful to know that we shouldn't use that because somebody had a pretty easy job making projections. I mean, it's either double or, you know, sorry.
And I'm not being, I mean, this is a different data set, but I think it shows that we need to be judicious and cautious.
Yeah.
As we don't just pull data off the internet and say we're going to use that and take it as gospel. Now, I don't know whether maybe the I-10 traffic is going to be 250% or it's going to be 150%. But I think we have information that we can use to begin to project that. But I don't want to go through all those calculations unless the committee wants to do that, or if you want to go out and do another methodology. So that moves us to, well, let me back up and say there is some information on pages 6 and 7. You'll see a column that says City 2021. And this sort of reinforces the point we just made about the lack of utility in the 2040 data. The city projections are shown for SH 46 east of Main, And then there's two others on page 7.
That's not a projection,
It's
it's
a-
actual
Well,
count.
excuse me.
Count.
Right. These are actual counts. So just for the benefit of the audience, you'll see that on SH 46, that's River Road, east of Main Street, the city actually counted with the little, bubble tube, 14,928 cars per day. Now, TxDOT was projecting 14,584 in 2040. So you've already exceeded
2040.
their 2040 projections.
So is that a traffic count throughout the day, or what is?
Sure, so the city of Bernie owns our own counters, the rubber tubes that Don, very similar to the TxDOT method. And we actually set them out on a Monday morning and pick them up on a Friday morning. We ignore the Monday and Friday data, and then we take the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday data, and we average it to be one day over the 3 days is how we do our study.
And so that seems consistent with the idea that is the main thoroughfare for 5 schools?
Correct.
Going and coming, going and coming?
Correct.
So that's not necessarily, I want to say alarming that there's all those people out there, but there's probably all those parents out there twice a day going and coming. And all of us going to HEB, or some of us at least, and the banks and Walmart and so forth.
Correct.
Okay.
So looking at that particular number, can we make the assumption that they're using the same counting mechanism? You referred to the place out there on Monday, and what they're required to have TxDOT does to get their numbers, to get that 2020, 10,417.
I'm not certain of the exact TxDOT method, so I don't know if it's the exact same.
Is it an apples to apples comparison, or is it two different techniques?
Traffic counting, even though it's a numbers game, in my opinion, is not an exact science. It's a way of approximating something, and you do enough data points to where you see general trends, and then you apply those trends to the section of roadway or infrastructure that you're designing. So I'm like Jeff, I don't know the exact nuances of each methodology, but I think they're similar.
Similar equipment.
On page 7, you have two other.
Just one thought, I'm certainly no forecaster when it comes to traffic, but it's easy to see. In the first page of this attachment, it says the population is going to double, essentially double from 2020 to 2040, and it's going to triple double from 2020 to 2040, triple by 2050.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to say, well, hey, traffic's going to double. What we don't know, does behavior change when population increases? So, for instance, we know, I'll just tell you, by 2040, in all likelihood, there will be in Bernie Independent School District a high school, a middle school, and 2 elementary schools west of Interstate 10. These are folks that have no need to come on Interstate 10. Does that change? Or does the percentage of kids that take the bus to school increase as the distance from your home or your subdivision to the school decrease? In other words, parents don't want their kid on a bus for an hour, but 20 minutes is no big deal. Will that change it? Well, we'll just see. I mean, I hope so, but I don't know. So I would want us to go into a little bit more depth. I mean, it's a number. I mean, logic tells you the number is going to increase, right? If the population doubles, logic tells you it's going to increase. I just don't know that we can conclude that it will double.
Rich, I want to ask you a follow-up. We're saying here that the population is projected to double from 2020 to 2040. We've heard we're going to double in size in the next decade. I was wondering, what does the BISD demographics imply?
Well, the latest report we got gave us 3 options of growth. One growth was, they called it faster growth. The other one, they called it moderate growth, which I said, you really ought to change it, because 6 to 7% a year is not moderate growth. That's very fast growth, but it's all semantics. But their central growth forecast doubling in the next 10 years. However, they will add a proviso that their gut tells them that it'll be somewhere between the slower growth and the medium growth, which would be in the next decade, roughly 70 to 70% growth in that ballpark range, which equates to about 5% a year compounded.
So that's more than what we're seeing here.
Yeah, but you have to remember that we're basically in the southern part of the county. So if the county is going to double, it's going to do more than that in the southern part. And our school district goes into Bear County, where there'll be continued fast growth.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
So, again, on page 7, there are a couple of other locations. One is FM 1376 north of Highway 87. This is over by the EMS building. It's on 1376. You'll see that the traffic there now is essentially what TxDOT again is projecting for 2040. Traffic now or 2021 was 3569. TxDOT's 2040 projection is 3601. And then on 474 north of Adler, the city's count this year is 6,374 cars. TxDOT's projection for 2040 is 6,275. So that again tells me that we probably ought to just cross out the 2040 and that we ought to probably cross out the 2020. We've used it to say that our starting point is 2019. Now the question is, what do we do going forward? And, some things I did, I checked to see how the growth rates for these road segments, if we applied those to the 2019 data, how does that compare with the city's counts? So on SH 46, the first one we looked at, River Road, if we take the city count in 2021 of 14,928, and if we take the TxDOT 2019 data, 2019 of 12,957, and we apply the average growth rate per year of 4.9% for 2 years, we come up with a count for 2021 of 14,258 versus the actual counted 14,928. In that case, extrapolating from 2019 using the average traffic growth on that roadway gives a pretty good result. Did I lose anybody there?
Yeah.
Okay.
You lost me.
Okay. Let me take another run at it. Okay, 146 East of Main, right? Okay, you see the 2019 traffic count, 12,957.
I got it.
Okay. Now, go over to the far right-hand column, and there's a 33.1% total growth over 6 years.
Oh, at the bottom.
At the average of all.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't have this data, this number there, but that equates to a 4.9% average annual growth rate. So if we take that 12,957 and we grow it at 4.9% for 2 years.
You go up by 2 years.
Okay.
That's 34.
We come up with almost exactly the same number as the city counted that year.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Good question.
So it implies the data sets are compatible with each other,
Well,
given your average.
That one's pretty good. The other two, not quite so much, but they're there. 1376. We use that same methodology. Instead of 3567, we come up with 3569, we come up with 3277. And the other one, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
The other one, instead of 6374 that the city counted, we come up with 5,937.
Good.
So that, I think, at least for the next couple of years, Now, what Rich says is true. People's behavior changes in response to a changing condition. You know, it's not just the different schools, but it's also there's a maximum capacity and a roadway gets congested. People are going to find another roadway until it gets congested, and then they'll find another roadway. So there are factors that we really can't model here very well. But I think for the next 3 to 5 years, we can probably use the average annual growth rates applied to 2019 to get a 5-year projection, maybe a 10-year projection.
Don, I think that's a lot of that sounds fair. One thing I did want to add in is just the more we've tinkered with this stuff, the more complicated we've realized it is. And I think there's certain events that can dramatically change traffic, like the development of a new HEB out in Bergheim, for example, might all of a sudden dramatically change traffic coming into town, or the development of a new high school in a different direction where so much of that traffic was driven by a certain anchor store or facility of some kind. And so I don't know if we have some projections about some of those things. I think we've had rumors about different HEBs being developed or grocery stores and things like that. Just something to consider when we get into details and starting to think about specific road. I don't think that they always just grow linearly in that way. Like suddenly, there's things that could mitigate that as new things are developed.
So Jonah, as somebody who lives on Best Street, halfway between Main Street and HEB, I really wish they would build another store somewhere. And I worked there for a number of years, and I've lobbied as hard as I can to get one out in Bergheim, and the answer that I get is no. It's the one at Fair Oaks, and down there, Fair Oaks is about all they're willing to do, and that's not going to help me very much.
Well, I think your point is right on. The question is how do we make that? In the absence of knowing that, what do we do? Now, I will tell you that Jeff Carroll will probably verify this. When they have a major development coming in, at some point, they have a traffic impact analysis, a TIA, that does reflect the impact of the additional traffic generated by that facility on roadways within what rate?
2 miles.
2 miles. The county does the same thing. So I think we have a TIA for Shoreline Park that we reviewed, or did y'all do that one?
We both reviewed it.
Okay. There's a TIA, I believe, that we've got it for Biedenhorn. So we have some data there that we can reach out to where we know. And I would imagine there probably was one done for Voss Middle School.
But even then, they use the same assumptions that we're using now just to project out in the next couple of years. So when you're thank you, because even then you're looking at the same projections we're using, because you can't just pick and choose what year and what area. So these are all just assumptions. Those are TIAs are actually regional assumptions too. I think the way we're headed is the right way, without having to pick and choose which year, which area. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I do remember one of our pre-pandemic conversations being about having accessibility to some of these facilities. I mean, our HEB service is a enormous area, and it's sort of a liability. You know, redundancy is a thing that builds a secure place too. If we had some kind of event happen and that HEB went offline or something, it's nice to have extra backup sources of things, but when you're planning transportation, you don't necessarily have the ability to plan where commercial development happens. And but it is something that we thought about early on, which is how can we encourage that, sort of regional hubs. If there was a little hub in Bergheim and a hub here, that would reduce people's need to try to drive all the way into Bernie and stuff.
Yeah, and as a backup to that, Bob, you might know this from your HEB experience, but it'd be interesting, you keep hearing these rumors. I love these rumors, Chick-fil-A's coming to Bernie.
They're here.
And well, they are here at the old city hall. But then you hear, no, you have to have a certain population density for them to come to your community. Okay, whatever. But I'm sure HEB knows what that population count is. I'm sure that Target or Walmart has that. And we do know, from the demographer for the school district, there is the estimate of the number of homes or housing units going to be developed in the next decade, and then you can extrapolate that a little bit further. And and what people may not be aware of is that south of 46 and west of Interstate 10, within 20 years, could very easily double Bernie's population just on its own. So, would that qualify for an HEB in that part of the county? Would that qualify for another Walmart? Would that take traffic away? So I think if we, not that it commits any commercial developer, but if we had a basic idea of, what kind of population those businesses want, we might be able to say, well, gosh, within 20, 30 years, we're going to have 3 supermarkets in Bernie. And we have 1 right now, 1.5 if you include Walmart. So, I'm not saying that's the answer, but just as there will be schools eventually, in Bergheim right now, there's a middle school. Within 12, 13, 14 years, there's going to be an elementary school. Will there eventually be a high school out there? Would that change people's behavior? So I think if we project it as best we can where commercial properties are going to be, the rough ballpark area, that might impact our view on what kind of road structure is necessary. That's all.
Well, I just want to throw in there that I agree with everything that's being said, but I also think that there's another outlier, which is, what about alternate modes of transportation? There's this assumption that dollars spent on roads are the best dollars spent versus, say, for example, public transportation network that could emerge within the next 20 years, within that timeline. Is it reasonable to even think in those terms, and does that actually also potentially reduce the burden? We have a habit in Texas of constantly investing in more infrastructure for the individualized, operator of an automobile. But there may be another paradigm to embrace, and the cost benefits, both short-term and long-term, for investing in different infrastructure options, might even be favorable towards alternative modes, and embracing more holistic transportation infrastructure. And actually, what we're talking about right now is holistic transportation planning. Not this siloed, okay, big box store here, okay, school over there, but thinking about the whole system as an integrated.
Well, I agree with Ben, although based on what Rich has said about the growth the school district is projecting at 5% annually, based upon, Don, your numbers, which are very helpful. There's a lot of information here, but based upon those numbers, the average annual growth rate seems to be about 5%, right? So if you extrapolate that out over time and just use the simple rule of 72, you're looking at doubling your population in about 14 years and quadrupling it in about 28, right? So by 2050, we may have 400% more in Kendall County than we do today, rather than the 300% more the Texas Demographic Center is suggesting, just by using the 5% annual growth rate. So the low-hanging fruit we've talked about a lot, and I think we need to grab that as best we can, but I still think there's going to be a need for some new connectors somewhere across Kendall County to increase mobility, which is part of this committee's charge. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, Don, but on page 10, your last page 10, you've got a note that says, while acquiring private land for a public roadway should not be undertaken lightly, which it shouldn't, widening existing roadways and making limited realignments is a better approach, as it is likely to inflict less harm on the rural character of Kendall County than constructing high-capacity highways on new greenfield alignments, which I think we all can agree with. If you're going to take people's property for new mobility purposes, you better darn sure have good reasons, like going to war, right? You don't do it lightly. You've got to have a really good supportable reason. I would add, though, to some of these characteristics and qualifiers that you've already gotten, a few others that myself and Jonah and Ben and Seth Mitchell have kind of fleshed out when looking at, Greenfield's route, so to speak. Not to say that
we're going to pepper these all across Campbell County, but there's going to be a need at some point for something different, something new. And in addition to what you've got here, Don, I think our small group felt like there was another 7 or 8 different items we ought to consider, sort of as guidelines when looking at something new in a Greenfields type road format. First of these would be that new construction would be limited in footprint and access. Along the lines we've discussed, go ahead.
Could we, I'm just about wrapped up on this.
All right.
Those things are in a group of policy recommendations.
So at the back, yes.
Yeah.
I've jumped ahead, haven't I?
You have.
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't want to jerk
for
you
the
back
only
too
reason,
hard.
Well, okay. Well, the only reason I've got to leave in 10 minutes for another meeting at City Hall, but I'll wait till
Okay.
you finish and then we'll
Well,
discuss that.
your thoughts are very right, and we will wrap this up quickly.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to mention that there's a another data source that kind of goes to some of the questions that were raised by somebody, I don't remember who it was,
Ms.
about
Rudd.
traffic, Ms. Rudd, I believe, about what truck components were and where they were going, origin, destination. And a group, let's see, I think it was, who were the guys that did that? Were you in that group, Bobby?
Which group, Commissioner?
No, it was Marco and Steve Sharma, and Bob was there. But there's a program called, or commercialization of big data called Streetlight. This is something that is used by many commercial establishments like Chick-fil-A and a lot of businesses that try to decide where they're going to locate and what kind of businesses they're going to situate where. It tells you can tell you what commercial deficiencies are in the Bernie area. For example, I think the one they've noted for some people is that there's a shortage of athletic equipment stores like Academy here. Well, yeah, that's true. But they also have taken this data and found a way to correlate it to traffic counts, and they can give you not only origin and destination and truck components, they can give you demographic information about who those people are, what their socioeconomic background is, whether they're college graduates, and a lot of other data that's very scary if you worry about it. So I don't want to get into that today, but I would encourage all the members of our committee and the audience to go Google www.streetlight.com and review what they do, not just for transportation planning, but see how pervasive this technology is and how correlated it is to the traditional methods of counting traffic. And I know that sounds a lot like black box stuff that we heard come out of the Gateway study, and to some extent it is, but that Gateway study was done 6 or 7 years ago, and I think you'll see that big data has improved dramatically since then. They've correlated their information, and they've acknowledged that they had some erroneous data, not just in the Gateway study, but in all of the way they were collecting data, the way they were counting trucks, and so they've augmented their Bluetooth counts with actual truck data, routing services that exist out there in the commercial field.
It's streetlightdata.com.
Streetlightdata.com, okay.
Don't type in that other one.
Okay. Oh, it's a bad one?
It's not bad, it's just
Okay.
weird. Not bad.
Streetlightdata.com.
Was that a fat finger response there, Councilman?
But I would ask that you look at that and familiarize yourself with it. It's a little bit too early to roll out now, but it may be something that we want to use together with this other data to get the traffic count underpinning for our proposed planning. Well, I don't want to cut Mr. Banwell short. How much time do you have?
A couple of minutes?
Okay. No, we don't have time. We'll look at it next time.
Okay. All right.
Just very briefly, we have some policy recommendations. This, again, is Chapter 10. These are draft policy recommendations that Bob and I have looked at. This is kind of what we heard people say. I'd ask the committee to look through this, but right now I want to give Mr. Van Wolf his due.
Well, thank you. Don, just in addition to what you and Bob have come up with, the small group, again, Jonah Evans, Ben Eldridge, Seth Mitchell, and me thought of some additional items that ought to guide our decision-making process or recommendations with respect to proposed new connectors, roads. One would be that the new construction be a limited footprint and limited access. We have talked about the Wurzbach Parkway, but I think Mr. Kyle suggested Blue Ridge Parkway was a better model, which I agree with. Two, any new construction should follow parcel property lines and not split or bisect across parcels owned by the same owner. And in the event that we end up splitting somebody's property, even while we're trying to avoid that, we'd like to think that that road would be elevated through that section so the property owners got access to and from the other side under the road. Wildlife would also be able to move under the road, much like a reverse Hardberger land bridge, if you will. Third, the new construction should limit the number of property owners' parcels affected and the length of the route so the beauty and pristine nature of the Texas Hill Country is preserved as best we can. Fourth, new construction, which you pointed out in your summary, Don, new construction should have screening and or sound deadening walls, barriers, or pavements where appropriate. 5, new construction should be limited overall and leverage existing roadways as much as possible. That's also in your summary. 6, avoid areas of highly sensitive karst features or other environmental issues that we wanted to avoid. And I think, Ben has harped on that a lot, and we've had a good discussion with George Vanny and others about that issue. 7, any new road must solve a specific identifiable traffic mobility challenge or item or issue. There's got to be something specific we're solving for. And then finally, this is an unusual one, but I feel strongly about this because no one likes to be surprised to read about themselves in the newspaper. But, if we as a committee are going to recommend anything specific in this regard, we ought to visit with owners of property or parcels we think might make some sense before they read about it in the newspaper. I mean, we ought to reach out to those folks ahead of time. I don't know if this group can go into executive session, if a small committee does that, or what we do, but no one likes to read in the newspaper that their parcel, even the western edge or, very out limit of their land is being considered as a possible site for a new road. We ought to tell these folks ahead of time before they learn about it in the newspaper. That's something I feel very strongly about. I also feel strongly about what Ms. Rudd said earlier about taking our time. She noted the UDC process, which I was involved in as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we did take, Ms. Rudd, whatever time we thought we needed to do it the right way. And I think we did it the right way. And I think everybody would agree in the city of Bernie that we did resolve that issue and make those recommendations and implement that with adequate time and adequate public input. And I know this committee will do the same when it comes to transportation issues in Kendall County. Thank you. That's all I've got.
That's a lot. That's good.
It's only 2 minutes worth.
So that discussion was had in the context of us anticipating that the controversial topics are coming down the
correct
coming our way. So and just trying to make sure that we outline some principles that we at least would hope we could observe as we have those discussions. And I think it's fair to say to everybody in this crowd that everyone's concerned and legitimate. I mean, I personally really resonate with those concerns. And that's where the transparency aspect comes in, not just for these meetings, but also in terms of making sure that there is adequate outreach to say, hey, this is being considered. And I don't think it's just considered like, here, we're coming, but more like, and what are your thoughts? For some people, they may say, hey, we see an opportunity to make more money off of our land. And obviously, in some cases, there are people saying, heck no, I love this place and I want to protect it for, ad infinitum, forever. But at least it allows that discussion to happen rather than it being one-sided where the people who, not our committee, but the people who do have the power to utilize eminent domain aren't just simply showing up saying, your land's ours now, which is pretty much how it happens, in a sense.
I think there's actually 2 parts to it, Tim. One is the actions of this committee in terms of making any formal recommendations. You're advocating that we contact any affected landowners before we even move forward with a vote to make something on their property be a recommendation. Under the major heading of policy recommendations from this committee to the governing bodies that appointed us, we would be recommending to them, if they ever move forward with any new road completely outside the purview of our work, that they too contact landowners before they read about themselves in the newspaper.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it gets to the issue of transparency, and again, no one wants to learn about this in the newspaper. They want to be approached first. And again, like Ben said, there's no predisposition or preconceived notion that we're going to do this. But this is being discussed. You need to be made aware of it. And what are your thoughts? I think given the numbers that Don had today and the information that Rich has shared with us, I mean, I think you can safely assume at a 5% annual growth rate in population or traffic that, you know, by 2050, that the population of Kendall County is going to be 4 times what it is today. And so you're going to have to do something. And we want to do that something in the right way, clearly.
And it may be,
Didn't you have your hand up?
Earlier.
we'll come back to you.
I was just going to say, Georgia, my son goes to Southwestern
Use a
University
microphone.
now, and they used to have a public transportation system in their city, and they take him now from their, because no one's. So I think that would be the problem with our, people love their cars, people love their trucks. And also Sisterdale Road, just my observation living on Sisterdale Road. You know, a lot of people go up Sisterdale to Luckenbach. They go, Sisterdale was considered one of the most beautiful passageways, you know, highways in the state. And so what I've seen, since I'm kind of not far from the highway, is I think there's a lot of out-of-state license plates. There's a lot of people going to the winery across the street from our ranch, all the way to Sisterdale, over to Comfort. So you can't really use that data and extrapolate that it's the growth of our county, because I haven't seen a lot of growth where I live. There's a lot of ranches that are doing a life, you know, where it goes from generation.
Conservation easement.
So I don't see the growth out where we live, thank God. But I do see the traffic patterns have increased, and I do believe it's based on the tourism within Burn, which is a good thing. But that's my personal opinion.
Thank you. You had a comment? Sorry, could you give us your name, please?
Who, me?
Yes.
Denise first.
Denise Herbst. You got that? Okay, next.
I'm Catherine Marnell. I live out in River Mountain Ranch. And listening to all this, it seems to me like we let the horse out of the barn before we built the fence to keep it corralled in. And when I look at that, you know, I don't see that developers have been, and maybe I'm being naive, that they have not been given checks and balances, because I look at 3 things that occurred in our community in the last 15, 20 years we've been here, is we have finite resources such as water. 2, we have an infrastructure that obviously was not prepared for this kind of growth, i.e. the roads. And number 3, we have a lifestyle that the denigration of that is going downhill. I don't see them improving at all. It's not what we moved to this area to retire for. So I wanted to know how closely you work with whoever is okaying development going unchecked.
Don, I might take a little.
So we can record.
Yeah. I'd like. Could I ask you to restate that at the end when we get to public comment? Just do your best. I'd appreciate it, because nobody can. It's not public record unless you're speaking in the microphones. And I'll address your question at that time. Turning back to the policies that Tim Van Wolf laid out for us, these are policies that recommendations to the city, both cities and the county, that they incorporate into their policies and their regulations for what I call the land use transportation complex. There is a connection between land use and transportation. So many, like this lady, are concerned about how does development affect transportation? What can we do about development? Some things we can do some things about, some things we can't because we don't have the power. These are the things that I have heard from this committee, and they're here for your consideration and amendment, scratching, removal, elaboration. They're certainly not complete, but we need to get these things on the table so that we can begin to move forward. And I'll just read for you, starting with the first one, Downtown Bernie Master Plan. Many concerns expressed through the crowdsource app were focused on the urban core of the city of Bernie. The concerns included pedestrian safety, pedestrian access, parking, and the passenger vehicle/truck ratio, and more. Because River Road, Main Street, Bandera Road, and Blanco Road are all TxDOT rights-of-way, the city's ability to make improvements within those roadways is complicated at best. The committee recommends a two-step process, and that's my anticipation that you will recommend, but if you don't want to, you're okay. Just tentative. The committee recommends a two-step process for the downtown master plan development. First, the city of Bernie would evaluate the cost associated with assuming responsibility for some or all of the TxDOT roadways within its corporate limits. Second, equipped with the clarity of which entity controls the right-of-way, the city would undertake development of a master plan for the downtown area of Bernie. In 2008, the Bernie invited a National American Institute of Architects Regional Urban Design Assistance Team, otherwise known as RUDAT, to study downtown and make long-term recommendations for its preservation and improvement. That study provided a solid starting point, but it needs to be updated. Major emphasis should be placed on streetscape, pedestrian accessibility, safety and parking, and include consideration of a trolley/shuttle with one or more remote parking areas. Comments and feedback?
So I've thought quite a bit about this policy recommendation, and I don't think you can have that as a standalone recommendation without some explanation of what the alternate route is going to be, because then you wouldn't be able to weigh the concerns of the community about the cost of developing a downtown versus at what cost to the community in trying to find an alternate route. So I think it ought to be coupled with a defined alternate route so that the community can understand the entirety of that proposal.
Alternate route for what?
Main Street, 46 on Main Street.
I guess I thought if TxDOT gave it over to the city that there would just no longer be a business 87.
Then where would their 46 go?
They wouldn't give it over unless they had that alternate route.
Right.
But
Is that a known thing that if they sold or if we purchased the 87 from TxDOT or that part of 46, I guess, that they would have to, the TxDOT would want to have an owned piece of alternate route?
That's a presumption that I made.
Okay. I just don't know
Carol,
that that's
do
the
you
case.
have any insight into this situation about TxDOT versus alternate routes that might help us?
The only statement I've ever heard is that the city taking over Main Street and a portion of River Road would be somewhat tied with some sort of other place for the TxDOT trucks to go. And at the same time as the city and our taxpayers to have to maintain those very expensive roadways, it would be a lot of money for us to maintain roads that outside the city people are driving on.
Mr. Chairman. Bitsy, I see what your concern is, but I believe since we were trying to provide recommendations in a policy, a short-term and a long-term, we decided that downtown study was a policy because we received so many crowdsourcing concerns about a downtown from not just congestion, but sidewalks and crossings and parking and safety. We can't solve that here, so that was the proposal for an agency, i.e. the city of Bernie, to take that piece in one study and try to determine some options. We're at the 30,000-foot level. We can't provide options at this point. That's just this is what we feel will get most of the crowdsource concerns considered and possibly abated with that study. Was that the purpose for the policy, I thought? So I'm saying that because I think it's well-written and we should proceed as such.
Well, go ahead, Bob. In my view, he has two parts to this.
Okay.
If the first part was evaluated and it was just ridiculous, unfeasible, let's say, for the city to pull that off with TxDOT, and there was just too many other strings attached and costs and whatnot, that still doesn't mean the second part of that coming out of crowdsourcing is still not 100% valid. Safety, pedestrians, parking, crossings, trail connectivity, all of that would still be a policy recommendation coming out of this committee to the city. Deal with it. Sit down with TxDOT and do what you got to do. It's going to still be their road, but we need safety.
With the downtown study that we're suggesting.
Okay.
Correct.
And, Don in here says, first, the city of Bernie would evaluate the costs associated with assuming responsibility for some or all of the TxDOT roadways within its corporate limits. I think that word costs associated, I know it's small, but Bitsy, what you were saying, I was completely agreeing with. Clearly, we don't want to put a policy here that has some large unintended consequence that we're not expecting. But if we're evaluating, taking on that road, that cost might be financial, but there might be other costs as well that are associated with assuming responsibility that then at that time we determined to be not warranted or not worth the benefit.
Is there a way that we could address the issue? I guess my biggest fear is that we would say, okay, we think we need to take it over, and we're gonna cover the cost associated with that, but we're not going to make any decisions about developing an alternate route, and that decision then would default back to TxDOT, and that's the one thing that we've seen to be a disaster in the community. And I think somehow if it could be written into the policy that we would still maintain ownership of a decision for an alternate route and not just boot it out there back to TxDOT.
Well, I think both of those comments are entirely legitimate. I think that we can amend the cost analysis prerequisite with alternative analysis, add that to that, and then say, if it turns out it's infeasible from a cost standpoint, okay, well, we probably ought to say how we would recommend they proceed in terms of addressing the problems that have been identified here. Because there's one way of addressing them, and if we're entirely in control of that, and another way of addressing it if we're working cooperative with TxDOT, right? Anybody want to, Bitsy? You open this can.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it'd be great to collaborate with TxDOT and toward those goals regardless. It's just a matter of whether they want to collaborate toward our goals. That's a key question.
Well, it gets more complicated just because you got, But can you take on trying to wordsmith that paragraph to?
In the moment, no, but I could think, but I think I'd prefer to have some help with that.
Gary?
I'm not a good wordsmith.
My hand is not up to volunteer.
Put it down then. Yes, sir.
Is it possible there's two different policies? And deal with the safety in downtown issues without going in the curveball that we need to own the streets?
I think they're linked, Gary, personally. I don't think we can just go out there, Jeff Carroll can't just go out there and decide he's going to put in a curb, a handicap access. He's got to get permission for everything he does, and there's certain standards that he has to comply with whenever they do it.
And any partner with the city, even though they still own the facility.
So we have a maintenance agreement for basically everything curb out, but everything with TxDOT, everything curbed in is TxDOT's to maintain. But it took me weeks to get a paint spec approved to paint the yellow curbs here on Main Street shortly, as a refresher. So anything and everything I do with TxDOT is a lot of effort to coordinate.
Yeah, and I think part of this is communication with the community. Is that I mean, I get frustrated. Well, why can't they just go X, Y, Z? And, well, this is why, because it's not that easy.
Well, you also inherit the traffic signals.
Yeah.
Correct.
If you take the roadway.
Correct. So that's a common, the city of Bernie owns and operates 2 traffic signals today. They're both on Herf Road, Herf and Oak Park, and Herf and Old San Antonio. What keeps me up at night is one day when the city inherits all the other traffic signals, which would happen one day if we ever hit the 50,000 population number that we've written earlier. That's a humongous cost that the city of Bernie would have to increase our budget to maintain all those additional signals.
Not a Christmas present for this year.
Correct. No.
Good thing they'll all be roundabouts by then.
Here, here.
I'm just trying to give Zach some good material for his article.
We have 19 minutes left. And so what I think I'd like to do is defer consideration of these other policy statements or frameworks until the next meeting or possibly one after that. And this will give you all the time to look through that and do what Tim and his committee y'all did. And encourage y'all to come forward with specific updates if y'all want to collaborate with me so I can possibly include those updates and we can submit those to the entire committee at the next time we consider these. It would be helpful. Just for those in the audience that don't have a copy of this, I'll just give you the titles of the policy subjects we're talking about. One is preserving the hill country environment and character. Another one is preference for acquiring land along existing rights of way versus greenfield alignments. That was some of the stuff that Tim was talking about. Another is major thoroughfare planning. Another is adopt consistent right-of-way and roadway geometric standards. And then there's a few other sort of design criteria things. But that's where we're headed, and this isn't, in spite of Jonah's attempt to completely peg this as my document, it's not. This is the committee's document.
Where do we have Tim's comments?
Do what?
Tim's comments.
Yeah, I'm going to ask him to get those, and we'll incorporate those to the extent that I didn't sense any objection to any of his comments.
Thank you guys for sending me what we post on the website.
Yeah.
Under the presentation tab.
Well, so how does that work? Because Tim's got his list, and so you want to add it in and summarize it, and that way she's got one master document that these folks can come back and tell us they hate. I'm just playing.
Well,
And on the website.
Okay.
You'll notice that this has a draft of it with a date on it, and the next one will have a draft with a different date on it. Hopefully, I'll remember to change the watermark.
Okay.
But we'll keep up with it that way. Let's see.
Don, there was a statement about development. Would you like me to comment about development and thoroughfare plans?
If you'd like.
Sure. So a question was raised earlier just about development. I was going to comment from the city's point of view. We've talked about it several times, but the city has a major thoroughfare plan. So we've had many versions of it. The first version was back in the 70s. It's been updated many, many times. Herf Road that was mentioned earlier was one of those roads that actually showed up in the 74 version, just kind of show a road plus or minus in that location. As development does occur, and by state law and our legislators in Austin, there's really little rights that the city and the county can do to stop development if they follow all our rules. But if a parcel is sold to a developer and the developer shows up and talks to us, and if it's in the city limits and if it's in the ETJ or extraterritorial jurisdiction, which is currently 1 mile buffer from the city limits of Bernie, and we have a road on our major thoroughfare plan, we can get the developer to build that road as part of their development. So that's that map that we have, that's what we've been doing. And so if you look at the thoroughfare plan and you look at South Glen and Regent Park, and Esperanza and ranches at Creekside and even Herf Ranch, you'll see as development is occurring, these thoroughfare roads are being built. And they're not really connecting yet, but soon a lot of these connections, these dead-end roads that we have in these developments will start connecting as the next development and the next development occurs. We're reviewing plans right now for the road that will connect Herf Ranch Boulevard to ranches at Creekside. That's a common one that occurred in the crowdsourcing of making that connection. We're reviewing plans today, and the only way that we can force those developers to make that road connection is because it's in the major thoroughfare plan. Also, as part of developments, we have a TIA ordinance, or traffic impact assessment ordinance. So when a development comes in, they're required to look at existing traffic. And so the city of Boerne does our own counts. We also, basically for every development that happens, we get additional counts from their engineer, their design engineer, where they'll go out and count the existing traffics, and then they'll look at projections of what they think their project will be and add to that. And then any roadway intersection within 2 miles, we're allowed to evaluate. And if it makes a significant impact, we can have that developer make improvements. And so there's been occasions that there's been right turn lanes or signals or other devices that can be occurred by developers where it's not even on their property, it's down the road. And the best example of that is Herf Road itself. The Esperanza development provided, I can't remember, plus or minus $2 million to build that roadway. So if it weren't for Esperanza, we might not have had the funds to build the Herf Road that's there today that we're using as a bypass. That's just one example of the funds and the projects that development do go into and create offsite improvements for projects. And so part of that development is we see also is the right-of-way, even on some projects where it goes back to Texas state law, and there's a Texas Supreme Court case that defined rough proportionality, where there are some projects that we have to look at the demand of their project onto our roadway system. And there are some projects that their demand doesn't warrant them actually widening the road. So let's say on Cascade Caverns, for example, we had the Quick Lane development, and then further down the little multifamily project. Their developments had enough traffic that we were able to widen the right-of-way and actually build the pavement, curb, and sidewalks. There's other locations on Old San Antonio and elsewhere that the traffic volume from their proposed development wasn't high enough, but we were at least able to get a right-of-way. And for future road building, getting that right-of-way for future road widening is a big ask, too. So there's a lot of developments that occur that we get that road widening section. So one day in the future, say on Old San Antonio, we'll be able to have that road widening, or the right-of-way that we could go in and put in turn lanes, or a center two-way left turn lane, or et cetera. So just wanted to comment on how what the city reviews inside the city limits and inside the 1 mile buffer to the ETJ.
Thank you, Jeff. We're now to the second opportunity for public comment. And let's go to Ms. Warnell first, let her get her statement in. Please, if you don't mind, that way we can get you recording.
It's Catherine Marnell. I live at North Star Court in River Mountain Ranch. And some of that, I understand what you were saying. But again, have you been at Herf Road trying to turn right on 46?
Drive through it every day, unfortunately.
At 6 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
And you have to wait 7 lights before you can get through there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I don't care who improved it or who paid for it. It was a bad, flawed plan. So I just want to know, I understand what you're all doing and I appreciate it. I know what it takes. I used to be involved in something very similar up in Seattle. Unfortunately, that's another area where transportation failed that community. Being military, I wasn't listened to quite as often as I'd like. But I just think that the development here is astronomical, and I just am so concerned about the finite resources again. I've been there when my neighbors did not have water. The wells ran dry. Fortunately, we had a deep well, so we offered showers. But, and yet I still see growth everywhere. that water is not going to last forever. And then I see just the quality of our life. We try not to come in town. You know, we try to avoid that. So all I'm saying is I want to not just keep in touch with what you're doing, but what's going on, who is controlling, who's allowed to build or not build, and what is that process so that we can stay informed. Because I appreciate y'all saying we want transparency. We want you to be a partnership in this. But this is a very small part of the equation, as you just explained. So obviously we've got homework to do, but we need to know where to look for that homework.
Thank you.
Don, would it be okay? I had a follow-up thought on I really appreciate your comment. I think that many people in the town have similar sentiments and are, have memories of how Bernie used to be when you went to the grocery store and recognized everybody there. I was born in this town in the early or the late 70s and been here most of my life. I think there was an effort a while back that the county commissioners worked on related to trying to gain a little bit more ability to help influence growth and development in the county, because our counties have as close to no control over that there's almost no ability to control development in the county. And there was an effort to do that at the legislative level in the state, and it was not successful that round. But Don, would you, or someone who's more knowledgeable about that, I think it just would be worthwhile to share that effort.
We did. In fact, that's not the first time, but there have been several attempts made to gain additional authority, regulatory authority from the legislature, which is the worst political subdivision of the state, and we can only do what the legislature allows. We can regulate some of the development, some aspects of development, but density is one thing we cannot regulate specifically unless it's based upon water availability. And water availability standards are set by the Cow Creek Groundwater Conservation District. And so that's what our regulations for density are based on. It's been demonstrated by the court that if a developer goes outside the county and secures water from a source outside the county, we have absolutely no control over the density. And the effort that we made this most recent session was to get that changed. A very innocent, simple change should have been simple. If they're drawing that water from the same aquifer that they'd be drawing within the county, that wouldn't count. That would be water that's within the county. And we barely got a hearing, and it just died. And the development lobby is very strong. They believe very strongly in private property rights, and they represent their developers. So there's little we can do on this committee about development regulations, but I would encourage you to contact Senator Donna Campbell, who is she represents this area. We're going to have a new representative, Kyle Biederman, who was our representative, has announced he's not going to run. We are hooked up with Gillespie County, the western part of Travis, and Blanco County, and we actually go on up a little bit further. So there'll be a race, and now's a good time to ask people how they feel about giving counties additional authority. But it's a huge uphill fight, and I think any county commissioner, this county commissioner, any county commissioner welcomes your support for getting us additional authority. Ms. Rude, did I see your hand up? You want to comment again?
You answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Other public comments? Is that Ms. McCarthy back there behind that mask?
Yeah.
Just don't miss that whole first piece.
Something to consider.
How are you, ladies and gentlemen? It's been a while since I've been here, and I appreciate y'all's diligence in continuing to meet. There's a few points that I'd like to bring up. You talked about the extension of time and taking your time, and that the agenda for this meeting was one thing, and I think that there's a large population in this audience that was here specifically for that. And my concern is that if you defer this a couple of weeks or even 4 weeks, we're completely through the holiday time frame of making a decision where people have to take off work again to come and address this committee in a time frame where maybe they can't afford to do that. So please consider that when you reschedule that discussion. Also, the data projections, when we were meeting before more regularly prior to the pandemic, we discussed how the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we discussed how the pandemic may change the structure of how people work. And data counts somewhat project that, but it's not clear yet. I firmly believe that there's going to be a shift, even more so, where what we call normal commute will not completely go back to the way it used to be. I think there's going to be smarter big companies that are allowing more and more intelligent people to work from home or work from a hub instead of commuting to downtown, and that needs to be considered. There was a discussion about Greenfield Roads, and you did already bring up the difference between a Wurzbach and another type. Greenfield Roads are all over the map, and it's been discussed for some of the bypass, but that limits people who actually own those properties to be able to get back to where they need to be in the community. And as what has been proven in this part of the state, it doesn't really permanently limit the development. It happens. Y'all have talked repeatedly about, and for several years, how to fix the roads. We've talked about roundabouts. We've talked about synchronizing lights, making paint. These are all good concerns. Bike paths, Jonah and Ben and this gentleman have talked about bike paths. That's quality of life. I think that should be considered. But a lot of people in this audience and this community are concerned with their life, their major investment in their homes, their properties, their livelihood, their children's lives. So a lot of people in this room and in the community are concerned about where those roads go. And Jeff has talked about the procedure, how that goes, that these maps are here to give them control over a developer wanting to come through, and I appreciate that. But the reality is what's happened is Herf Road was the first line of the thoroughfare. The Herf was developed. There was a decision, okay, you'll have a connector. The thoroughfare gets moved out. Then ranches at Creekside and Esperanza that was going to be the major thoroughfare and the roundabout. Those places were developed. They're now giving up just a little connector, and the major thoroughfare is pushed out to people like me who, as you said, were less property owners, giving up larger portions of their land, but it's still my home, and it is for a lot of the people here in this audience. That needs to be considered. I understand that understand that, there are procedures in place, but those lines have been pushed out to some of the most sensitive ecological areas in the state, for sure in the county. And I don't want that forgotten. Please don't forget. That's our homes. That's our community. We've been here for years. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy. Other comments? Ms. Gerhard.
I just wanted to add, it's Lisa Gerhard, 103 Ammon Road. Ammon. I have sat in on most of the meetings, and I did go to some of the subcommittee meetings. And most people here who drive every day know the times not to get in the critical spots. We all know about the bridge and the problems on 10 and that entire backup. You can rationalize all you want about the traffic problems right now, but you have to take into consideration those bottlenecks and why they're happening. Now, in the subcommittee meetings from this committee, we're talking about getting children and parents to and from schools. Very important. There is data that backs up real families that are going to be moving in, that are going to buy houses, and we have to get their children to and from school. Perhaps some of the street counting should happen at the entrance to the schools, or to the entrance to HEB, or the entrance to Walmart, and factor those in some of this data that's talking about all these numbers. Whatever you add, it is not going to help Champion, Bernie High School, Herf Elementary, all those places. And those numbers are important because unless you come up with some sort of incredible cloverleaf at Herf and River Road 46, you're going to always have those backups. And so coming up with these fantastic new routes that aren't going to solve those major problems, those should come first because they're real. Getting the kids around is real. Doing those counts of those children that have their own vehicles and their parents going in and out of these schools, because I drive those roads every day, and we know what time it's bad and what time it's fine. And once 10 is done, 3351 project, which was pushed out for whatever reason, is done. And the bridge, I really think things are going to loosen up. And I do it every day. But anyway, there's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ms. Gerhardt. Yes, sir?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing the public to be involved in this. My concern isn't directly with some of the things we talked about today as much as is I'd like to have a clarification, maybe other people would, on...
Your name?
Oh, sorry, Bill McNaught. I live in the county. I'm sorry. And that is, my concern is with the structure of the overall authorities that are making decisions on what roads are going to be built in Bernie and in Kendall County. And so we're kind of working in a big mass of organizations that want to have an opinion on this and want their own way. So that's what I'm concerned about. Now, I know right now we can look at it from a narrow perspective or from a much enlarged one. And looking at it from the Bernie perspective, I think the question some of us may have is, if Bernie's going to look of making changes inside of his own jurisdiction, then are there any powers that inhibit Bernie from clearly making those decisions? I mean, you guys have ultimate authority to say, in the city, we're going to do the following, and then we can enforce those. Now, I'm not sure to what extent, if at all, the city can make plans that impose anything on the county, on Kendall County. Because we know that Kendall County has rejected the gateway, and they've done a number of other things that seem to be in support of really the spirit of a lot of what the citizens want. And so I'm not sure how either the city of Bernie or Fair Oaks, their little municipalities can't really weigh too heavily on the decisions that the county's going to make. But now if we draw back one more step and we look at AMPO, this massive collective of power sources out of Bexar County, San Antonio, it involves a number of cities, it involves a number of counties. And these guys have their own interests and concerns that are going to conflict with what the citizens here want, because they have these massive problems in San Antonio about toxic materials coming through, freight lines. There's too many cars going by. I think they're under some restriction, the federal government, to get road money. I mean, they have their own interests, and they need us to do their bidding for them. So, of course, what we're all concerned about here, at least a lot of us, and that is we are going to become agents of this massive collective of power that's right down the street from it, and they are really not going to allow us to make decisions that are not in line with what they want. So the questions become, when there's a conflict of interest, when there's an impasse, who's going to ultimately decide what roads are built in Bernie, in Kendall County? And say, for instance, we know now, I think that AMPO is funding some developments on the south side. So when they're putting up 80% of the money that's coming in, they're going to have a lot of say as to how they want that money spent and what they want the structure of the developments to look like. So I would just like to better understand, to make sure everyone here understands, how do the sources of power interact in this overall decision that we're looking at, not only with fixing reasonably congested sites inside of the city of Bernie, but drawing out to the county issues and trying to get from I-10 to north, 35 to I-10. So is the city here just narrowly looking to make decisions about what it's going to do inside of Bernie, period? And that's all that this committee is really going to strive for? But we have Bernie and Fair Oaks in the county, so that if you can clarify the power of the structure power. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. McNaught. Well, I'll just tell you generally, this is a countywide committee. We are making recommendations. I think we've heard all three elected leaders of each of those political subdivisions pledge to cooperate with each other and take our recommendations into serious consideration. AMPO, in my experience with them, will not unilaterally take on a project in an area in opposition to a political subdivision. In fact, they require that cities dedicate or contribute anywhere from 10 to 30% of the funds for that project. So if the city of Bernie didn't want a project, all they have to do is withhold their funds. Same thing for the county or Fair Oaks. And I think that if you look at the relative contribution or investment of transportation dollars or tax revenue into transportation system, you'll see that TxDOT has invested something like $100 million in the last, more than $100 million in the last 10 or 15 years, much of which is in concert with TxDOT, with AMPO's planning processes. Whereas the cities in the county have invested considerably less than that. So I'm not too worried about some big bad foreign entity working against the wishes of the citizens of Kendall County. And I don't believe that the city of Bernie is trying to consider its transportation system in a vacuum without regard to how it affects the county and vice versa. I don't know if other people have a sense that differs from that. Any other comments? I just scared myself. I thought I'd quit early, but that's 3 hours, 2 minutes and 25 seconds. It is past 4 o'clock, I'm sure. We will meet again in 2 weeks, I believe, which will be the first Tuesday in December.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make sure, for those that gave their hard copies, I wanted to ask Northern, are we able to get an electronic file of what we picked up? No problem.
Yes, you will.
If not, I can make copies or scan it,
We'll
scan
get it
some
to
of
you.
these and send them back.
It'll
still be November.
Oh, 2 weeks is November. Okay.
Even a scan?
So we can shoehorn an extra meeting in if you'd like, or we can wait until December the 7th. I guess it'd be the 7th, is that right? Mm-hmm. Which would mean we would be meeting 2 weeks in a row on November the 30th and on December 7th. What's the preference of the committee?
I just soon meet on the 30th.
30th, agreed. Do it, just get it moving, 30th.
Yep, I agree. We need to get going.
Because I'm not
Any
gonna be
objection to meeting on the 30th? Hearing none, we'll meet on the 30th. We're gonna.
2 weeks from today, we'll be ready.
There you go. I like that.
There you go.
That's what they told me. We're pushing it. We're pushing it.
And I would encourage y'all, we do publish the agenda we do the best we can to publish it within the statutory time limits. Zach is doing a good job of reporting these meetings, but the official source of the source for what's on the agenda, check our website, www.kcbfotc.com, and you can confirm that what we told Zach at this meeting is in fact what we're actually going to do at the next meeting. And Zach, we appreciate you being here. That wasn't criticism. That was just clarify that there's more than one source of information.
Don, is it fair to say that when we discuss the quadrants and the controversial areas of the community, that'll be, kind of bolded on the agenda, very clear to see on the agenda?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, we had it ready to go, but it was
Okay.
pulled. And Northern has given me a commitment, I believe, that we're going to identify the projects that.
I can identify the quadrants,
Okay.
definitely, and same geographic. I can have it something very specific that we can put on the agenda, saying that we'll discuss all crowdsourcing ideas in the southeast quadrant, being south of 46 and east of I-10. And that would be what would be on the agenda in my mind, unless you guys have another idea.
So just from a standpoint of process, I know we were kind of doing a first pass at all the crowdsourced stuff just to see what actually, first of all, what came back to this committee, and then what this committee said, okay, we'll go ahead and put it in a big parking area. Are we going to do the same thing with this stuff and go ahead and add it to the same big parking area and then go down to the fine-tune, like the real decision-making process? Okay.
I believe.
Simply because of the way it's structured in the database.
Okay.
So hopefully y'all are relieved that we're not considering the Kendall Gateway. The Kendall Gateway's dead, but we appreciate your interest and your diligence in making sure it stays that way.
Keep coming.
And you're welcome
Keep showing up.
to keep
Yes.
coming back.
Here, here.
With that, we're adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.
See it, Mary?